Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. This is the Introduction to the Nature, Towns and Cities programme webinar. Welcome. I'm Matilda. I'm a project manager for the Nature, Towns and Cities programme. It's fantastic to see so many people on the call today. We're really excited to be sharing more information about the programme with you. So I'm just going to speak for the first few minutes to outline what you can expect from this session. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this slide gives you a more detailed look at what we'll be covering for the next hour and a half. Part one of the session will focus on the programme overall and include an introductory talk, as well as hearing from two leading voices from the sector on their experience of transforming urban green infrastructure. Part two of the session will go into a deep dive on the grant. We'll have a 15-minute presentation from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, followed by a Q&A. Next slide, please. So by the end of today, we hope attendees will have access to all the key details about the Nature, Towns and Cities programme. Oh, I can see there's some chat functions. I'll let the production team from Iris and Birch help with that. So I'll keep going. This slide really sets out some helpful information about today, particularly some sort of housekeeping messages at the bottom. By the end of this, obviously we hope attendees will have access to all key information. I'll talk through some of those bullet points just to help with anyone who's having tech issues. So if you have a question on the programme, please use the Zoom Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, rather than putting your questions in the chat. If possible, could we ask you to hold questions about the grant to part two of the session, when we'll have some more chance to go into that topic in depth. So we'll also be sharing links mentioned by our speakers throughout, so look out for those in the chat. We've enabled automatic captioning for the day, so if you want to turn that on or off, you can do so in the settings at the bottom of your screen. If you have trouble with the connection at all, please check your internet and your firewall settings, but you can also put questions or ask for help in the chat, and we can help you with that. And then just to flag, this session is being recorded and will be available in the coming days. So next slide, please. This is the last one from me. This slide gives you an idea of who you'll be hearing from today. There's a range of people from the programme and partners presenting today, including colleagues from Natural England, National Lottery Heritage Fund and the National Trust, as well as Ollie and Kat from Camden and Plymouth councils. So I'll hand to Victoria now to give you more information about the Nature, Towns and Cities programme.
Hi everybody, welcome. Lovely to see you all. My name is Victoria Bradford-Keegan. I'm the Programme Director for Nature, Towns and Cities. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an introduction to the programme and what you can expect if you choose to get involved. If we could go to the next slide, that'd be great. So Nature, Towns and Cities is a programme designed to help over 100 towns and cities across the UK transform access to green space. Overall, we want millions more people to be able to enjoy time outdoors in nature, really close to where they live. We also want towns and cities to be able to help use nature to address some of the challenges facing towns and cities in the 21st century, from climate change to health inequalities, economic inclusion and community cohesion, and much more. By joining Nature, Towns and Cities, you'll be able to help create greener, fairer, healthier and more connected towns, neighbourhoods and cities. And you'll be able to access support to put green infrastructure at the heart of future plans, priorities and investment. As well as that, we'll work alongside you to unlock further investment to help councils and communities achieve those ambitious plans. Nature, Towns and Cities is founded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, Natural England and National Trust, and we're working really closely with Nature Scot, Natural Resources Wales and Northern Ireland Environment Agency. We're also seeking a wider range of strategic partners and funders. This is a programme that builds on past work from the core partners, as well as the broader sector, in particular the Future Parks Accelerator programme, but also much more besides. And what you'll hear today is an invitation to join in to help shape the design and development of Nature, Towns and Cities, And hopefully it's an invitation for you to lead for change in your area as well. If we could go to the next slide, that would be great. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the component parts of nature towns and cities in a moment. Then particularly there are three that I'll outline today. They are a network, an accreditation scheme, and a grant. I'll keep what I've got to say about the grant to the minimum because we're going to hear from Heritage Fund colleagues shortly. But first off, an inclusive support network. This is designed to build confidence, capability, and connection amongst the participants. It's open to everybody and it's free for you to be a member. It will give you access to knowledge and successful solutions about what's working when it comes to green infrastructure and green spaces, and how to think differently about how they operate in towns and cities across the UK. It will be an opportunity for you to connect with other people that have led for change, experienced professionals from a range of fields relevant to towns and cities, whether that's economic development, health and well-being, or green infrastructure, and many more besides. It'll also provide you with opportunities to collaborate with others, both within your town or city, but also across the UK, and to create new partnerships. It'll be a space for you to access specialist support and advice to help solve some of the tricky problems and unlock new opportunities for your area. It will help you to lead for change locally and to tap into the collective wisdom that exists elsewhere across the UK. And importantly, it will be a chance for you to be part of something bigger, to be part of a wider movement for change, because we understand that sometimes it feels lonely to be trying to tackle these challenges alone and to face into some of these bigger opportunities and make things happen. It's designed for local government, community and voluntary organisations and professionals from across the UK. We hope to create an environment where you'll be helped by your peers, where they'll share what works and enable you to be able to take part in a programme of events, cohort learning activities, and also training. There'll be a library of resources, both written, audio, and video based, as well as tailored support. And as I said before, this is an open invitation for you to join in the Nature Cities and Towns network and to help shape it and make it what you would like it to be. If we could go on to the next slide. We also have an accreditation scheme. This will be piloted in England from early 2025. And this will enable you to benchmark your progress, but also, importantly, provide assurance. So potential funders and investors who would like to invest in the change that you want to make in your place will be provided with the confidence that your place, your programme, or your projects are a good investment. Because you will have needed to show that you've laid the foundations for change, whether that's strong partnerships, community empowerment and participation, effective leadership, cross-sector delivery, and importantly, a coherent plan for change and coherent improvement and investment plans. We hope that the accreditation will help to unlock financial resources that your place needs to implement its plans. If you'd like to help us, in particular, if you'd like to help us shape and test and improve the pilot accreditation scheme, there's an opportunity to get in touch with us via the website to put your name down to be part of that piloting group. If we could just go to the next slide, that would be great. And then finally, we've got a capacity building grant. This is designed to create the headspace and capacity in local teams, local partnerships that are needed to lead for change and to make change, ambitious change happen on the ground. It will give you the space to develop those ambitious place-wide strategies and project pipelines, as well as a case for investment. It will enable work towards new operational and delivery models, and create space for opportunities to work with communities and other local partners. It will also support you in creating new funding mechanisms and business models. There's £15 million available across the whole of the UK, and you'll hear a lot more detail about that grant in part 2 of this webinar. In a moment, I'm just going to hand over to two leaders and from local government sector. We're going to hear from Oliver-Jones from Camden Council and Kat Deeney from Plymouth City Council. They're going to talk a little bit about their experience of leading for change over the last few years and what being part of a programme like Nature Towns and Cities has meant they've been able to do. So without further ado, I'm going to hand to Kat Deeney from Plymouth City Council. Sorry, if we could just go to the next slide, that'd be great.
Hello, my name is Deeney and I am Head of Environmental Planning at Plymouth City Council. And as Victoria said, we were just here to really share our experience of the last couple of years where we were part of a kind of precursor to the programme that you're hearing about today, and how quickly we've moved on certain things, but also to share that the challenges are very similar today than we were when we were first starting. Next slide, please. So where we started, we had great ideas about what we wanted to do around transforming our cities and how we collectively cared, used and valued our parks. We knew how important they were to our place, how important they were in terms of linking with other agendas. We also knew that we needed to change how we funded that. So it's interesting that the dial hasn't really changed on the challenges that are facing parks, green spaces, natural spaces, in terms of the pressures on finances, the difficulties in local government. And so we knew at the time, and I don't think it's changed very much, that we need to have new innovations of how we respond to the greatest challenges, but finding ways of doing that is different. So we knew all that, but to be honest, we really didn't know how to do that, which is where the programme we worked on really came into its fore in terms of helping us to do that. And it really did, in terms of very similar to what you're being proposed with now, in terms of having some cash to help with that headspace, which is so important, to have a really strong network around us to help, really look at those tricky issues, like how do we develop new funding mechanisms? How do we really build that nature-based solutions into our cities? And then, having a network of other people we can work with. And, that really is such an important part of how we moved quickly, because we could share learning. And what that's allowed us to do is to look at each of those aspects of caring, using, valuing and funding our green spaces to move to, a profoundly different position that we're in now, in terms of what our ambitions are for our spaces and also how we embed them across the city. The nature in our city is now embedded in the structures, in the plans and in the thinking. And that is making sure that the nature is really part of the solutions to some of our greatest challenges, and that we're coming up with some really innovative ways of how to do that. And I think one of the strengths of the programme that you're all looking at today is the fact that you can really learn from others quickly and not reinvent the wheel, but it is on your terms. So it's about how you need to learn for your place. It's very about place-based delivery and taking the strengths of your area and the challenges of your area and really enabling that to move forward. So we're now in a position where we've got a new habitat bank, which is starting with biodiversity net gain and also carbon to help fund our spaces. We've got a new community forest, which has been developed in the last couple of years, which has got a real focus on our trees and our tree equity. We've got the UK's first national marine park, and we've brought all the learning from the green into the blue. And we're also at the stage where we are building those public and private investments. So please don't be put off by the challenges facing you, because I assure you we were facing exactly the same when we started this programme. Anyone who's working in local government at the minute, I do know how hard it is. But this is a programme that can really move the dial for you in terms of placing nature and how to fund nature at the heart of what you do. Next slide, please. So how has it helped, and how do I think it will really help another 100 places? It's really helpful when we're all facing challenges to know that we're all facing similar challenges, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel time and time again to find those solutions. So the sharing ability of the networks, asking other people how they've managed to move things forward, getting councillors to talk to each other, they're all things we can do, and there's such strength in that collective action. So it is a real, even if you just want to be part of the network, I think you'll find it hugely beneficial. We all know on this call, I'm sure, that nature can help with our greatest challenges. And I think one of the things we can do now collectively with the learning from previous programmes and all that will come out of this one is that we can move faster in terms of embedding those solutions. What it'll also help by working with others. So that support, that inspirational, and quite frankly, with the resources, really help move quicker to get us to a point from wherever challenge you're in at the minute to somewhere that you're in a much better place, much stronger place, and a much more resilient place. And also, if you're struggling to get people to really focus on this agenda, it's really helpful to be part of something bigger. It provides that interest and that focus. So in summary, I would say that the programme that we were part of, which is very similar to this, has really helped move us from somewhere where we had ambition and focus, but not all of the answers and the ideas, into somewhere where we've really transformed our service. Still more work to do, but it definitely gave us a big leg up into getting to the place we are now. And to share some more ideas on that, I will pass over to Ollie, who was also part of the cohort that we worked with. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Ollie Jones. I'm currently Director of Recreation at Camden Council. And we were fortunate enough when I joined the Green Spaces team here in Camden to have been awarded the Future Parks Accelerator funding. So I can't take any of the credit for the idea, but you know, I began on day one. So I shared the journey from the very beginning. I'm missing, and we could have had my right-hand person here or my left-hand person here, Andrew Bedford from Islington Council, and Piers Simon from our shared public, at the time, our shared public health team, because it was very much a joint programme between all three parts of the councils. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Our project was around delivering parks for health. So Andrew and colleagues from Camden and the public health team had a very good idea about how parks could be reshaped to really focus on their core being. You know, the parks were health assets from 20th century to improve people's health, you know, when smog and, you know, horrible viruses were crashing through the country, that, you know, having space to recreate and be outside would improve people's outcomes. And we really wanted to focus back on looking at that by looking at how we can change our parks, how we manage our parks and make them those kind of health assets. You know, without this funding, it would have been very difficult for us to have the space to kind of consider those, bring people to the table, kind of understand what people's views were on that same idea. So joining this program does give you that kind of capacity and that kind of interest to what can be the delivery of your fantastic ideas on the ground. And, you know, Camden and Islington shared that. We were a partnership with Islington as the lead deliverer for that. And, you know, we worked weekly in and out during COVID. After COVID, you know, we became a shared team because of this program. And, you know, I feel that we can comfortably talk about each borough still now because we're that close to each other, and how we work together. It really did allow us to learn from each other, but also to kind of understand how we can help each other as well. So if we move to the next slide, please. Really why we're here, obviously me and Kat are here to kind of give you an example of, you know, why you should join this project, because it's not just about the money. It's everything else that kind of goes alongside the money. The money helps you deliver, have a little bit of resource within your authority at a time where that can be challenging. It can mean that you can do things a little bit differently because you're not having to bid for internal resources or change people's roles. You know, you can do that a little bit faster and a little bit easier. But the idea that this funding gives you is really a bit of impetus, a bit of profile. It helps you talk to others across the council. And in our case, through our public health team, you know, we got very good contacts across the voluntary sector, parts of the public health system I didn't even know existed before this programme, and, you know, really improve your understanding of really why parks should exist. And then obviously the funding does help you reach out to get those specialist resources. So there's consultants that can do pieces of work for you, the research that you need to do, the buying of products or data that you just don't have, but, you know, think could be really important. And really how that has kind of changed for us is that it's really put green spaces at the top of the profile for quite a few years. You know, I'd be lying to say that COVID didn't help. You know, we were all desperate to get to parks during COVID to kind of get out and improve our health. So rationale was kind of proven for us, but really kind of grasping that opportunity and making sure that parks were always considered is something that we've worked really hard on. And, it's led to us presenting at all parliamentary groups. It's led us to award submissions that really kind of help us finesse what we're doing and share it across different areas. And it's really helped us to talk to government and local regional stakeholders like for us, the GLA, and have a kind of shared language that, they see us as a leading light in these areas. And, for us as well, it's been a really good product to kind of engage our communities in something positive. There's an opportunity, like sharing what we can do across our communities and understanding each other. And, that's something that shouldn't be taken lightly. There's a lot of input required, but you get a lot of value back out of it. And it is really worth your time. And the support that you get from the Heritage Lottery and National Trust and the colleagues in the project is invaluable, as well as it is from the cohort. Like people like Kat and Andrew and people from Edinburgh and all over the country. It's really refreshing when you have those honest conversations about your journey, where you're at, what's happening to you. You always get good ideas that can lead you in new directions. Next slide, please. So me and Kat are hopefully imploring you to kind of get your bids together. Think imaginatively. Don't just think about what it means to the borough and necessarily your idea. Think about who else in your location or around you can really value from what you're doing. It's the right thing to do, and the situation we're all still in does mean that this grant can be revolutionary. It can change your own thoughts about what the service can deliver, but also what parks and green spaces can deliver locally. There's a little quote there from somebody who's part of that kind of process. And that would be my leaving remarks. That we always talk about in local authorities about we should evaluate how successful this project has been. Fortunately, that is something you can plumb in from the beginning, and it is invaluable to hear back how impactful it's been, what people have found valuable, what you found valuable. As you kind of move to implementation and deliver this, and then share your learning to everyone else as well. So there's the cohort me and Kat were part of, there's a whole wealth of resources delivered in addition to what we created that kind of share the learning from across different places to make it applicable for everyone. And that's really why it's a fantastic grant, because it's sharing that learning, not just that you've got, but everyone else as well. On that note, I'll finish up and hand back to Victoria, I believe.
Thanks, Kat and Ollie, for your stories and your reflections on being part of Future Parks, which, as we've said, is very similar in design to aspects of nature, towns and cities. We've had quite a few questions in, so I'm going to turn to those in just a second. But just before we go to those, and whilst we're welcoming other members of the panel, I just wanted to say a little bit about what we mean by green infrastructure and urban green space. We're taking a really broad definition of that, and we do also mean blue spaces, so rivers and canals and the coastline. And really, from an urban green space perspective, it is everything you can think of, from street trees to woodlands, from pocket parks to big country parks on the regional parks on the through and on the edge of towns and cities. But it's also, really importantly, it's about people. So from green champion volunteers to green careers and people starting and progressing through their journey in the sector, in employment in the sector. And why I was also just going to touch on why we're doing this. It's all about radical change, ambitious radical change for people and for places in towns and cities across the UK. We want to see a significant improvement in the quality and the quantity of green space that people have access to close to home. We're not trying to prescribe certain interventions or solutions. They will need to be determined locally by what is needed and wanted in your place, and that will come out of the work that you do as part of this process. But what we're trying to trying to enable is that people can have access to great green space really close to home, that they want to spend time outdoors, and that green spaces are at the heart of local communities, and that they're places and spaces that people feel pride in. But also that they're able to shape what happens in those spaces and take action local, close to home. Overall, we're looking at the reason we're looking at whole towns and cities is so that the green assets, those green and blue assets, can play a role in facing into some of those 21st century challenges we talked about right at the start, whether that's climate resilience or nature and biodiversity recovery, but also about how people live their lives, whether it's about active travel and active lifestyles, or really just seeing green infrastructure as a really critical part of the infrastructure of that town or city, alongside things like rail and broadband and schools. And that it can be something that's invested in, and that will contribute to a place being a thriving, prosperous place that people want to live and work in. So hopefully this has given you a little bit of a food for thought about what's on offer, but also what your program might be, what you might want to take away from the program. I'm just looking through some of the questions now, and I will I'll ask various members of the panel to join in and to answer them. I will try and save most of the grant questions for later, but I'm going to start actually, Ollie, with a question for you, if that's okay, around your particular project. So we've got a question here, which is, what role has Public Health England played in shaping the Supporting Parks for Health project? And how have you collaborated with other local health organisations?
I'll do it in reverse order. So the local authority public health team were the third leg of our stool. So imagine Camden being one leg, Camden Green Spaces being one leg, Islington Green Spaces being one leg, and our shared public health team being the third leg. They were integral in actually really in a lot about the process and understanding the kind of the benefit the parks had and the kind of connections they had into the communities as well. Obviously, that team in particular were quite busy during the early stages because that was when COVID was keeping us all quite busy. But they never stepped away. They were always involved at assistant director and director level. So we had that kind of leadership and connection into both boroughs' senior leadership teams through that kind of conduit. Public Health England did do a piece of work about access to nature and improvements in it. So we were invited to be part of that work. We discussed it with the team who were leading the work, and we were referencing the case studies as part of it. But we were very much doing some of the groundwork to their kind of overview document rather than they had any necessary help from Public Health England. That's what I'd say.
Great, thanks, Ollie. And then actually, maybe for both you and Kat, we've had a question around local authority-led partnerships and whether this is also an opportunity to work more with third sector organisations. I just wonder if either of you have had any reflections on how this has enabled you to work better with voluntary sector partners.
Because I've got the mic open, I'll go first, Kat, and then you can follow on. So when we came up with the idea, I think we didn't have the foresight to really engage the local community groups at that time. So they weren't core partners to the project. But what we very quickly found is that we wouldn't really get very far without them. So we developed some work and some partnerships with key ones in both boroughs to ensure that we had things happening on the ground, so activities happening on the ground to understand what was beneficial. And we had a whole strand called Green Social Prescribing. So we needed some activities for our local GPs to refer into in local parks. So in our boroughs, a lot of those activities are run by community groups or voluntary sector organisations. So having those partnerships and those connections are really key. What I would say in hindsight is I think it'd be really good to get them involved from the beginning. Having them involved and having some of the funding to support them to be there at the table would really help and allow them then also to get further funding to support that kind of activity beyond what the grant could necessarily deliver. So I think a broad partnership is really important. We were lucky enough in our case to have the GLA contributing and a key part of our steering group, which also really helps kind of unlock like regional kind of connections, not just the local and borough connections as well. I'll hand over to you, Kat.
Thanks. I mean, I would echo that. I think, you can't do anything in a place without involving as many people and organisations as possible, because there's only so much you can do within your organisation. In terms of communities and voluntary organisations, we definitely have grown as part of that programme. So we had some good partnerships already, but I would say quite a lot of them were quite traditional. And one of the things we wanted to do was make things more inclusive, and link into things like social investment businesses, as well as communities and organisations. And I think one of the things, because of the headspace and support we had, and learning from across the country, we kind of found new ways of doing that, and how to enable people to lead in that space. So we've linked up with social enterprises in parks, which was really successful. We hadn't done that before. And they've then obviously, grown themselves, and it's, that ripple effect of, one change here leads to lots of changes elsewhere. Our community work is, I would say, much more inclusive now. And again, that's grown from the programme. And we now have a Green Communities programme throughout key areas in the city where our staff and National Trust staff are embedded within social and community organisations to make that relationship much tighter. So it is a really key area in terms of getting that ripple effect and that kind of place-based impact, rather than just, individual organisations. And I think, that was one of our key outputs, was around care. And it didn't mean changing just how we cared for it, but making sure that there was a change in how everyone felt they could have a part in that care, and building on the strengths, because all organisations have got different strengths, different parts of their organisation can do different things. So it is a real strength when you can harness that, and collectively come up and deliver an impact that you all believe in.
Great. Thank you both. Sticking with the theme of voluntary sector partnerships, can I ask you, Drew, just to give us your thoughts on who is eligible to be involved in this, both the grant but the broader aspect? We've had a few questions around is this just for councils, or is it for voluntary sector partners as well?
Sure, yeah, just looking at that chat, and I see that's a very popular question actually, is who can apply, who can engage with this. Just talking about the grants, and I will say more about this after the break later on. Those that can apply for the grant is our normal application guidance. So it's any not-for-profit organisation can apply to be a part of this initiative, to apply for one of those capacity building grants. So I'll say more about that later on. But from our perspective, yes, communities, all sorts of different partnerships is really important. And I think that was one of the pieces of learning from the Future Parts programme, was that some of the most interesting projects came from those where they were building new partnerships with new audiences that really had something to say about urban green space. I think it is amazing that, health, a lot of people have talked about health and the benefits of health for green space for a long time, but struggled to find a way of engaging health professionals and health organisations. And I think, working in innovative new partnerships is a really important way of building those links. So I think we're looking at really interesting projects that could be submitted by a local authority, a borough, a district, a town, a combined authority, a group of towns working together, a city, a community group leading for a local authority. And we're also aware that, some local authorities aren't able to, for example, employ new staff. So maybe working in partnership with a wildlife trust or a community foundation or something may be a way to go forward. So really broad as to who can apply, and it's our standard conditions. So any not-for-profit organisation can apply.
Fab, thank you. And Sadie, we were getting lots of questions about what is urban and kind of why the focus on urban green space. It's a tricky one without getting into specific population sizes, but could you give us a flavour of why as a partnership we're focusing on urban, but also what we mean by urban?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about where do the majority of us live, work and play, it's in towns and cities. And for us, it's absolutely integral and central that we bring nature to people where people live, work, play, where they can go out and experience it. Connectivity is really, really important, which is sort of fundamental within the green infrastructure framework as well. So thinking about, the grand aspiration of how we connect our landscape together and how we can enable everybody to be able to get out and enjoy and experience nature. So that's fundamentally why we're thinking about and looking at urban areas. When we talk about urban areas, that is a city, a town, a neighbourhood, a county town. So think wide and think broad. This is very much about making the places we live, work and play sustainable, healthy, resilient, and predominantly connectivity. So how do we connect nature, people, and be able to increase that species abundance as well? So, it's all about where we live, work, and play.
Great, thank you. We've got a number of questions in the chat about habitat banks. We haven't got a huge amount of time today, so what I will do is, if one of my colleagues has the link to hand, that would be great. We have actually got about 6 hours of webinar about habitat banks featuring our very own Kat Deeney here and colleagues. So we'll post the link to that, those set of resources, which is more than enough information for anybody with an interest in habitat banks. I'm sure of it, and all those questions will be answered. But I did just wonder if Kat and Ollie, you would be able to give people dialing into that a little bit of a flavour of how the work that you've done thus far has started, and I think it's fair to say it started, but has started to help you attract new investment and new investment in the broadest sense of the word into green spaces in both of your respective areas. People are interested in hearing about real life examples. Kat, do you want to go first? Yeah.
So yes, please do look at all the webinars. My team have done a great job trying to explain the journey in full, but I think the key thing we did during the programme was we identified we needed to move the dial, change the way we did things, and move nature basically from on the liability list onto the asset list. So that was really clear that we needed to do that, and we needed to find new ways of doing it. So I think what we did through the programme was we started to understand a whole new sector, investment sector. I've got an environmental background. It was a whole learning experience, which hopefully the work we've done, you'll be able to learn that faster, not go down the rabbit holes we did, and allowed us to move forward. But it's also allowed us to be quite brave. I know there was lots of questions about how the Habitat Bank works, but the key thing is we persuaded our leaders and our both officer and member to actually set up an arm's length company to enable this stuff to happen. So I think the journey we've been on is to be able to understand the systems that we're going to work in, to understand where the opportunities are coming from, and also to be able to explain that with data and information on funding opportunities to allow the council to do something different in terms of what we've usually done. So we've set up a family of companies, we've had our first investment, and the council decided to be the first investor, and we've managed to put in place, some really thorough, credible systems to make sure that we can be, gold standard in terms of additionality, how our legal agreements work, and to make sure, quite frankly, we only invest our land and our credits with people who have gone through the hierarchy of avoiding, mitigating, etc., before looking for their units. So I think, we can't go through all the details, but I think what it allowed us to do was to work with others and be brave and innovate in a space and then actually deliver it. And I think everyone should be able to work much faster to do that than we did, because of all the information and all the sharing that will come from this programme.
Great, thanks, Kat. Ollie, any further thoughts on that question?
Oh, it's hard to follow, Kat. I would say, it has given us an arguable ambition. Why should parks be here? There's often been talks about how parks should be protected, and we should have the duty to look after them. And this does take it into that space where no one can really question why parks are useful and that they shouldn't be maintained to a good standard. It doesn't provide you a money tree, not such as the one behind me. But it does really kind of give you a really understandable argument to why you should keep resources that you have, and unlock kind of potential like conversations that you wouldn't have had before, and that may lead to some kind of funding opportunities in the future. We have had a lot of very large investment into our green spaces in Camden, but that is a bit of a follow-on, because what we got from our initial project was a clear understanding about the value of parks, and then we went, unfortunately Camden's quite central in London, it's quite difficult to create a new park. But it then led us down the view of, well, look at this lovely highway, maybe we can turn some of that into green spaces instead. And we're very fortunate to receive a bit more money to look at that work. And that's really where we're getting the value now is, how do we add new green infrastructure all over Camden that's not your traditional park and not your traditional street tree, but greening the highway, really. And that's where we're working with partners and really leveraging in new money that we wouldn't have had access to before. So it's never necessarily a direct, there's money available, but it does lead you down areas where there is funding because the ideas are good and are proven, which is the point of the development project, development grant.
Great, thank you. We've got a load of questions, so we're just going to try and do some quick fire ones. So Sadie, this is for you. This is not just about nature recovery, that's correct, isn't it?
Absolutely. Does that quick fire enough?
Yeah, that's great. That's exactly
it's about nature recovery. It's about tackling inequalities. It's about health and well-being. It's about climate resilience. You name it, it's about it.
Great, thank you. And Drew, this is not just an England initiative. Do you want to say us a bit about the UK aspect?
Yeah, again, I think, the Heritage Fund is a UK-wide organisation. I think one of the few that exists. And one of the benefits we had on the Future Parks programme was working with the team in Edinburgh in Scotland. And whilst, the issues are exactly the same, every nation in the UK is struggling with funding for green space and greening the urban environment. The policy contexts are different, and actually there's quite a lot you can learn by working and understanding the context in different countries. So, we would love to be working with some projects in Wales where we can bring in aspects of the Future Generations Bill, for example, and, different approaches to climate change, nature-based solutions in Scotland. So there is a lot to learn from working in a UK-wide context. So, yeah, one of the things we will be really keen to do is to create a portfolio of projects that truly represents the UK and also represents all the different types of city, town, combined authorities that exist. So yeah, the portfolio of places that we work with will be really important, and the richer the better for the learning for everybody, really.
Great, thank you. And then just a couple of questions. There's a few questions in the chat about why this is aimed at whole places, whole towns and cities. Drew, could you take that one as well for us?
Yeah, I think, I'm sure a lot of the people on this call are from the nature sector, maybe, who understand the concept of networks. One of the things that I think Heritage Fund learned really clearly is that, we're 30 years old in November, and we will have invested over £1 billion in restoring public parks. Majority of those, around 900 of those, are the single, if you like, flagship or principal parks, but they're part of a network and they can't survive on their own. They often need to be cross-subsidised, or they can cross-subsidise other spaces. They are a really important node in the green space network across whole towns and cities. So, investing in single sites, we realise, whilst it's important and we can still do that, and their funding is open, if you want to apply for a regular park regeneration project, we can still do that. But we realise actually there's a bigger, more strategic approach that we could take here and support, which is about supporting whole green infrastructure systems across whole places. And that is what this is primarily focused on.
Great, thank you. And we've run out of time for questions now, although there's a lot more that are specifically about the grant. So we will pick those up in part 2, but just a couple of very quick technical questions. If you want, so all three aspects of this are designed to work together. If you want to sign up to be part of the network or to join the mailing list to find out more, you can do both those things from the Nature Towns and Cities website, which is naturetownsandcities.org.uk. But we'll pick up the grant specific questions the second part of this webinar, and also for more information about the actual grant, then the Heritage Fund website will be posting the links in the chat later on this afternoon as well. So thank you to my panelists and speakers, some of whom you will see later on. We're going to have a short break now, but we will be back at 12 o'clock to start part 2. Oh, sorry, not part 2. 11:50. Don't go away. Just a quick, very quick cup of tea, and we'll see you shortly. Bye.
Excellent. Welcome back. Hope everybody's refreshed with a cup of tea or coffee, ready for this next piece of the seminar, which is about our grant that we're offering. I'd like to also introduce my colleagues, Lorraine Robinson, who'll be presenting some of the slides with me. And Lorraine is the project manager for the grant element of the programme. And also, we're going to be ably assisted by Liz Bates, who's our head of investment for the Midlands and East. Liz has kindly stepped in at the last minute, as Louise Sutherland, who some of you may know, who's our head of engagement for the North of England, has gone down with COVID today. So hopefully Liz will be able to help us in answering your questions when we move on to that stage. I'm Drew Bennellick. I'm head of Land Sea and Nature Policy at the National Lottery Heritage Fund. I've been working at the Heritage Fund for now 15 years, so have been intimately involved in our former Parks for People programme, and then worked on the Future Parks Accelerator, and now obviously working with colleagues at the National Trust, Natural England and the agencies on nature towns and cities. So if we could move on to the first slide, please. So what we're going to talk about here is one of those elements that Victoria mentioned, and that is the capacity building grant element. And we're able to offer around 15 million of investment in total. This is part of our Heritage 2033 strategy that's been signed off by our board, which includes a number of strategic initiatives, of which this is one. And that 15 million will be used to provide capacity building grants that will range between 250,000 and 1 million. So it will be for places to determine how much money they need to be asking for in order to enable to engage with this initiative. That 15 million, whilst it sounds like a huge amount of money, it has to be spread across the UK. So we'll be looking for projects that range in size, and that size will depend on the scale of the place that you'll be operating in. In order to access the funding, we will need everybody to complete a mandatory expression of interest. And my colleague Lorraine will come on in more detail about that in a moment. But the expression of interest is basically a fairly simple form that allows us to understand your ambition and your vision for your project, and hopefully avoids people spending hours filling in application forms that are then latterly less successful. So it's a way of trying to manage demand and manage the process, both for you as potential applicants, but also for us and all those that are going to be involved in the assessment process. It's a single round application process. So you'll be completing one application form, and that will provide access to the funding. That's how this process will work, and also one application window. One of the things that was really important, I think, with the Future Parks initiative was that projects all ran together as a cohort and worked together as a cohort. So by having one application window, this is our chance to select a portfolio of projects that will all start around the same time and will work together, which I think is really important in helping projects to inspire one another and build collective ambition. The actual process of applying for funding will be familiar to many of you. It's our standard process, albeit there'll be one or two specific questions, but most of it will be our standard process offered through our online platforms, and Lorraine can say more about that. We anticipate that these projects, once up and running, will take probably 2 to 3 years to deliver. Again, that's our learning from future parks. I think we initially estimated 2 years. I think many of the projects took around 3 years to deliver. And we will also require 5% in partnership funding. And that can be either cash or in kind or voluntary contributions. And again, many of you will be familiar about how that part of the process works. A key part of the assessment process, and this comes from the launch of our strategy last year, our Heritage 2033 strategy, is that all projects will be viewed and assessed using our investment principles. So if we can move to the next slide. Now, this is a complicated diagram. As I say, this is being recorded, so you'll be able to have a look at this in more detail. But basically, we have 4 investment principles: saving heritage, protecting the environment, organisational sustainability, inclusion, access and participation. And we'll expect all projects to look at those 4 headings and the things that we consider as important beneath those and consider those in the project. Now, you'll be relieved to hear that I think most of the things that Kat and Ollie have talked about fit really neatly into our investment principles. So our investment principles around protecting and saving heritage, whether that's the social or cultural heritage of parks or the natural heritage of our towns and cities. It's about climate adaptation. It's about nature-based solutions. It's about connecting people to nature. Under inclusion, access, participation, it's about working with more diverse range of people, breaking down barriers to access, and working with communities to help them explore and understand natural heritage, nature, cultural heritage. And under organisational sustainability, it's about that financial sustainability, about, how can we leverage in new funding for parks, whether that's for maintaining existing sites and parks, or whether that's for developing new green infrastructure that Sadie and others have been talking about. So I think our investment principles, actually, there are a huge number of hooks within this that you can help us to deliver the ambitions of our Heritage 2033 strategy. Next slide, please. So what is the grant for? So this is not intended for capital projects. So I've seen, I think, a number of questions that come forward about, can we fund capital projects, whether it's, restoring play areas or regenerating a whole site? That's not what this grant is intended for under this initiative. Now, this 15 million comes from our grant pot, but it doesn't reduce the amount of money that will be available for wider programs. So if you're looking at a more traditional approach to regeneration of a historic site or restoring a habitat or whatever, you can apply still through our general open programs. They're still there, they still exist, and we're looking for applications for those as well. So this grant is all about capacity building. It's about delivering transformational plans for change, and it's about looking at whole networks, whole places, not just those single flagship sites or a single habitat. It's about how you network all these sites together to create a really effective ecosystem across a whole town, city, or a group of towns. The grants are all about providing headspace and capacity, because we know that lots of local authority teams are really stretched, as are the whole organisations. And again, Kat, I think, made this point really clearly. This is about buying you capacity. It's about buying you expertise so that you can collaborate, you can work with partnerships across your organisations, across departments, and across wider sectors. So working with wildlife trusts, museums within your town or city, there are lots of different partners that potentially you could be working a bit with. It's about thinking long-term about your strategy, about the future development of urban green space. It's about investing in skills and creating the next generation of leaders. And again, that's something we've seen really clearly through the Future Parks initiative. It's about creating those foundations for ambitious change. It's about helping you to step maybe aside from the day job and actually focus on, what could be done for the future to really make things different. It's about learning from others, so the cohort approach, and it's about innovating where no other solutions exist. So there's, as we've just said there about Biodiversity Net, there is a huge amount of learning that we've already gathered and that will be on the websites. But we're also interested in where people are thinking of new solutions or where no existing solutions exist. It's about creating new financial and operational models. And it's about places being an active, creating an active peer network so that all that learning that's going on can be shared. And I just wanted to say as well that we're really interested in working with other networks and other organisations. We really don't want to be duplicating the work of groundwork or Sustrans or Keep Britain Tidy or all the nation equivalents. This is about bringing together partners to work together on a major sort of movement here to drive change. I'd have to have the next slide, please. So a key question here is, what are we looking for in the applications that we might see coming forward? And this is about a focus on all public urban green and blue spaces across an entire place. And I can't emphasize that enough. That is a really important part. So if you come in with just a single site or a handful of parks that you want to consider, that's not what we're after. We're looking at you thinking about all the public urban green and blue spaces across an entire place. It's about ambition. So we want people to set out in their expression of interest how they will lead for ambitious change. How, what are the ideas that you've got that you really want to test out and develop over this 2 to 3 year period? It's about demonstrating partnership working and the benefits and the impact that you could gain by working with new partners if you had the capacity to do that. And particularly, it's about identifying the resources and support that you will need to do that. And Lorraine will say more about that at the moment. So who are the people that you really need to help you to drive the change that you're imagining or that you have a vision to do? And then it's also about allocating resources and capacity to join the regular online network, the events and the cohort learning sessions. And I was really impressed. I went to a lot of the cohort sessions that we did for Future Parks, and the combined learning that we saw across those groups was just really inspiring, and an element of competition that we saw as well. So we know we're really keen to have a really strong cohort of people. So we will need places to commit to joining that cohort and working regularly together. I'm now going to hand over to Lorraine, my colleague Lorraine Robinson, who's going to talk a little bit more about the actual expression of interest process.
Thank you, Drew. Yes, so I'm Lorraine Robinson. I'm a project manager supporting the delivery of this programme. And I'm just going to talk you through a bit of the nuts and bolts of you applying to our grant programme. So as mentioned earlier, this did come up about who can apply, and we really are open to a combination of applicants and partnerships. So we do want to see innovative new partnerships applying. In our guidance, we're a bit more prescriptive just about how this would work. So applications are open, as Drew said earlier, to not-for-profit organisations and partnerships led by not-for-profit organisations. If you plan to work with any organisations to carry out a significant proportion of your project, you must familiarise yourself with formalise a partnership agreement to formalise that relationship. Now, that's not needed for the partnership agreement, isn't needed for the EOI expression of interest stage, but we are looking at a list of who you're going to get involved with and who the partnership will involve. If you're making a joint application, you'll need to decide who the lead applicant is and who will be applying on our portal and submitting the form through our portal. And we usually expect the owner of the heritage of the public green or blue space to be the lead applicant. If the lead applicant is not the owner of the heritage, we usually ask them to sign up to our terms of grant in the event of a full application award. And if private owners or for-profit organisations are involved, we do expect the public benefit to outweigh the private gain. Next slide, please. Okay, so the expression of interest, or EOI, as we're shortening it down to, it's part of our regular process. It is mandatory, and it is the way that you will have to apply to this programme. It gives us an opportunity for organisations to approach us with their proposed project and outline the work that you're thinking of undertaking, partners that are involved, initial costs, so the who, why, what, and the how. And we use this to identify priority projects as early on as possible, because we recognise that to put energy into a full application, it does take quite a lot. EOIs are now open. They opened on the 1st of October, and they will close at 12 noon on Tuesday, the 12th of November. So you've between now and then to submit your EOI form on our portal. And the person leading your application, top tip, the person leading your application or submitting your EOI, we would encourage them to sign up to our portal, our online portal now, if they haven't already, just to get their account up and running. And there's no glitches when you come to apply. We have also provided a strategic initiative guide, we're calling it, but on our website there will be application guidance. We're going to put a link in the chat, I believe, to this, and that will also link you through to the expression of interest help notes for this particular programme. So we've built off our original standard EOI questions. The form has the standard questions for any programme, but you should use those bespoke help notes to help you fill in our EOI form for this particular programme. And ensure you address the questions. You're better having our EOI guidance open as you're filling out your EOI form. And make sure that you include the hashtag NTC at the start of your project title, because that helps us identify them on our system and marry them up to the supporting documents and the assessment and the review at our side. You need to make sure you focus on the investment principles, as Drew talked through earlier, and ensure you take into account all 4 of them, and ensure that your project does align to them in some way. Successful EOIs will be invited by ourselves, the Heritage Fund, to submit a full application using our standard process. So we'll be in touch by the 13th of December to let you know the outcome of your EOI. And then, as you can see on the last point, the penultimate point actually, the application window will open for full applications on the 16th of December, and this will be open until noon on the 7th of March. And then decisions for those full applications that have been invited will be in June 2025. Next slide, please. So for this programme, as I mentioned, we've bespoke help notes for the EOIs, the EOI form, and we've also a request for an additional supporting document for this particular programme. So we are requesting this additional information to provide us with factual information about where you plan to work, who you plan to work with, etc. So a list of partner organisations, an ordnance survey type map, estimation of the total area of the green space or blue space you're working in, and the total population that lives in that project area. And we're asking you to submit no more than 2 sides of an A4 page to the email on screen. And we encourage you to add your EOI reference. So when you submit on the portal, you'll get an EOI reference number for your particular application. So we're encouraging you to include that reference number and your project title in that email to us, because that will help us marry up your EOI form and your supporting documents as quickly as we can. Next slide, please. Okay, so some top tips. Just to recap, we do use a standard form for all of our EOIs across a variety of programmes, and we really do encourage you to look at those specific EOI help notes, which you can get through the application guidance on the website, and follow through those as carefully as you can, because they really do give you pointers in bringing out the strength of your answers for this particular programme. You must complete an expression of interest form on our portal, and you must submit that to apply to the programme. This is the only way you can apply to the grant element of this programme. We would encourage, if a range of partners are working on your EOI, would encourage you to maybe work offline in a Word document and then cut and paste that into the form before you submit. Just be conscious of word limits and word and character counts and things like that. If you please remember to include the hashtag at the start of your project title, hashtag NTC. As we say, we'll be able to monitor those dropping into the system. We'll be able to marry up the supporting documents and things. And this will really help us identify who is applying under this particular programme. The NTC at Heritage Fund email that we included in the previous slide is for the supporting information only. It's not for general inquiries. If you have a general query or question about your idea or project, we encourage you to get in touch with the local Heritage Fund engagement team in your area. And I believe we're putting a link in the chat to that, and it takes you to a page on our website where all the offices are listed and all the contact details are listed there, and you can engage with your local team to answer any questions. I think that is us. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew and Lorraine, and welcome, Liz. I've now got time for some more questions. We're going to attempt to get through some of the questions that have already been submitted about the grant, but also some, if you've got any extras, then do keep them coming, and we will do our best to get through them. So we have got loads to be going at, but there are a number that kind of have common themes, so I will try and group them together for you. First of all, we've got I think we've got questions around existing green spaces, green infrastructure, and new. Would one of the team be able to just clarify what is eligible for funding?
It's all green space within an area, whether that's existing or it's potential for new. So obviously Heritage Fund, we're particularly keen to think about those existing green spaces. So we don't want people rushing off and thinking this is all about new green infrastructure. It's about both. So it's about not neglecting those existing parks and green spaces that, you know, need to be maintained, need to be improved, need to thrive in the future. Excuse me, but it's also thinking about, well, actually, how could those be better linked together with new green infrastructure that might help, you know, nature-based solutions, flooding, more tree cover, whatever. So, yep, the programme is to think about both existing and new.
Great, thank you, Drew. I'm just going to mention now, there's a number of very specific questions that are very specific to a certain place. So we won't have time to answer those here, but Lorraine has mentioned, and I think it's been put in the chat, if you have got a very specific question about your set of circumstances in relation to the grant, could you contact your local Heritage Fund team? And that's, the link has been posted, I believe, and we'll post it again. That would be really helpful. Apologies, we can't cover those really detailed questions. Going back to the kind of bigger themes, we've got a number of questions about, can you apply for this alongside other Heritage Fund funding? And what about if you're looking for something smaller than the 250 minimum for this? Could one of you take both of those together, maybe?
Is that, Liz, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I can do. I mean, we do accept 2 or more applications from one organisation at a time. Obviously, during the assessment, what we'll be looking for is that you do have the capacity to deliver those simultaneously, and that the 2 work together. What I would say is that as this is capacity building and perhaps looking at some development work, it might be sensible to start one of these projects and see what develops before you come in to us for another project related to the work that you're doing. But there are options. And in terms of under 250, Drew, is that possible within this programme? It's certainly possible within the wider grants programme.
Yeah, we're aiming from 250 up to 1 million. That's the grant band. So if you're looking for something less than that, depending on the works, and again, quite a few of the questions I think have maybe been around the more capital approach, then please do look at our open programs where, absolutely we can fund capital works and capital improvements. And maybe that's where, again, you need to have a conversation with some of our local teams.
Great, thank you. And then I'm just looking for the, so we've got questions about how many grants we expect to be giving out. Is that one for you, Lorraine?
I can answer that if you want. So we're aiming for about to fund at full application round. So next June 2025, we're announcing the awards of the full applications. We're looking at around 20, just over 20. For AOI stage, we're really looking at letting through to the next round, inviting to full applications, 30 to 40 applications. So it's really starting to funnel that down. We've only 15 million. Grants are between 250k to 1 million, so we can only fund so many across the UK, and we'll also be looking to get a spread across the UK as well. Drew, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, I'm just going to add, I mean, obviously we realise capacity building funding is really key to a lot of these projects. So the 15 million, we want to try and stretch that as far as we can to support as many places as we can. So please ask for what you need. The objective as well is that the network is open to everybody to engage with. So, whilst, yes, capacity building, we may only be able to fund 20, 30 places, maybe something like that, depending on the size of grants and requests we get. The network where you can gain access to experts and knowledge and webinars and all of that, that is free to anybody. So that's why the wider ambition is to maybe support around 100 places, albeit there'll be a core that will be offered funding to do that. The other thing that is really difficult to know is what demand it's going to be like for some of these programs for the Heritage Fund. So 15 million, as I said in the presentation, it sounds like a lot of money. It may be that we need more. I'm really impressed by the number of people that have engaged with the webinar today, and really enjoying reading the comments in the chat about all the different local authorities that are here, all the different types of local authority that are here, and also local authorities asking for partners to work with. That is absolutely what this is about. This is about convening and helping partners to come together to drive for change. So it may well be that there are some local authorities who say, well, actually, we're going to form a small cohort here and work together ourselves and apply for a grant together. That's absolutely fine if that's the approach you want to take. So the idea is to try and help as many places as we can, either with grant or by accessing the wider network. And once we sort of get a first cohort underway, the indication of interest in this programme, will help us in going back and talking to our board. Maybe we can argue for more money in the future. Maybe we can get other funders to come on board to support us. But, this is the start, and, we have to start somewhere, really.
Great, thank you. Could we just I've got another two kind of vaguely similar questions. One is about local authorities, I think, particularly, but in this question, but generally, can more than one places or a cluster of places submit a single expression of interest? And the second kind of linked question is about land ownership. So can this cover land that is privately owned but publicly accessible, such as cemeteries and things like that?
Liz, are you able to take the first part of that question about multiple applicant, well, it's multiple bodies applying for one EOI? So, for example, it could be a combined authority applying with 3 other councils, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of an EOI, we're looking for a lead organisation to name themselves on the expression of interest. But if you plan to be applying as a partnership, it's just about explaining that within your EOI form. Just give us the information and the names of the organisations that you're looking to work in partnership with. And then once you come to submitting your application, if you're invited to do so, we would just be looking for some kind of partnership agreement that tells us about all of the different roles and responsibilities of the individual organisations in that partnership.
And just to mention on privately owned land, yes, privately owned land can be a part of an application, but you need to bear in mind that lottery money is public funding, so the public benefit needs to outweigh any private gain. So yeah, private land can be part of an application, but the benefit should be for the public, not for the owner of that private land. I think, is there any more to say on that, either Lorraine or Liz? Is that okay? Yeah, okay.
Great, thank you. And just whilst we're on the theme of partnerships, county level approaches to the grant applications, county level grant applications for multiple towns or residential areas.
We're open to ideas. There are, as I say, it's our standard not-for-profit can apply. And we didn't really want to restrict this. We want people to be creative. We want to do what works for people. So if it works for several towns coming together to plan, then yeah, really interested to see that.
Great, thank you. We've had a number of questions that are all about addressing inequalities, focusing on areas that are experiencing greater social and environmental need. Could you say a little bit about I guess whether or not the grant in particular is interested in focusing on those, or whether the criteria for the grant will look at that at all?
So I can maybe start, but I might need if Liz or Lorraine want to fill in the bits that I probably will miss out. It goes back to investment principles. So, you know, it's really important in looking at applying, you have those investment principles. And I'd urge you probably to have a copy of our Heritage 2033 strategy, which sets out the 4 investment principles. We need your projects to look at all 4 investment principles, although you don't need to deliver evenly across all 4, but we want you to take all 4 into account. And one of those is around inclusion, access and participation. And one of the things that we know from research we did, our State of Parks research, is that quite often those communities that have least access to quality green space are those that actually have less green space or poorer quality green space. So yeah, that's going to be an important thing to think about in your applications. So it's something we will take into account in assessing those, is how well you respond to those investment principles. But Liz, as an architect of investment principles, any other things that I've missed out there?
Yeah, just to say that, as you said, we're not looking for projects to take those into account equally across the 4, and the balance and the focus of your project is entirely up to you to determine and to demonstrate in your application. So this probably links to the way that we're assessing applications. So our guidance includes information on how we assess applications. So you can have a look at that. And then obviously for this particular strategic initiative, you can look at the aims and objectives there. So that's what we are assessing against. There's no hidden criteria. It is for you to look at those investment principles to see how your proposal best addresses that, and just to communicate that to us in your application.
Great, thank you. Let's just quickly having a look through for some of the key themes that are coming out. We haven't already looked at. I've got one around if you're can and should there be letters of, should places be looking for letters of support or similar things at expression of interest, or is that for later?
Lorraine, do you want to comment on that?
Or Liz might be best placed. It's quite light touch at this stage, I will say. So I suspect not. Like the partnership agreement, that's something we'd want to see at full application stage. So this is really about getting your idea in, getting the partnership list in and down on paper, really. So it is quite light. It's designed to be quite light touch at this stage. So.
Great, thank you.
I think just to add on the supporting documents that need to be submitted with the EOIs, I think it's a list of partners that we're after, list of names of those people that you plan to work with. And again, that's to give us an indication of how broad you're thinking. Are you thinking about health? Are you thinking about nature? Are you thinking about transport? All those different aspects. We're really interested in projects that are working across a wide range of, if you like, the things that affect funding and management of urban green space.
Great, thank you. We've got a question about NHS boards and NHS organisations and whether they can apply and to be part of this, but also specifically for their estates and their land as well. Is that one for you, Drew, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, entirely possible. Interesting that, on the FPA projects, a couple of them had really strong health board, as Ollie's just talked about. So there's no reason why not. They're not-for-profit organisations, so yes, they can apply. And I'd love to see health boards be a key partner in many of the projects. And I suspect, if we see projects from Wales, we would definitely see health boards are incredibly important in Wales. So I suspect we may well see that on Welsh projects.
Great, thank you. Just can we have a recap of dates? Is that one for you, Lorraine, if you don't mind?
So a recap of dates. So the EOIs are now open. They close at noon on the 12th of November. And then you should hopefully hear the outcome of your EOI application by the 13th of December. And then if you're successful and you're invited to full application stage, we'll provide more information for that opening on the 16th of December. And then you will have until the 7th of March to complete your full application. And there will be support for that across the programme and the partnership as well.
Great, thank you. And then we've also got some questions about time frame. So is the 2 to 3 years for, what do we mean by the 2 to 3 years, I think is the question. It's sort of been expressed differently in slightly different ways. So that is for the project that is subject to the funding. That's correct, isn't it? So whatever you apply for, there's 2 to 3 years to do that thing or those things.
That's the idea, that those projects that go to the full application and are successful, and I think Lorraine mentioned we'll make decisions in June 2025. Those projects will then have 2 to 3 years to deliver the work that they set out in their project application. So that 2 to 3 years purely relates to those projects that get the capacity building grant.
Great, thank you.
And just to say, in the full application, it does ask about those timescales and an accompanying project plan to kind of map that out in a bit more detail for us.
Okay, great.
Victor, can I just pick up another question I just spotted in the chat, but I think it's quite an important one we haven't mentioned, is how will the EOIs be assessed centrally in the UK or regionally? I think it's just important to say that this programme, the application assessment for the capacity grants will be led by a Heritage Fund, but with support of the National Trust and our other agencies, and they will be assessed locally. So that's within our nations and within England and our 3 area teams in England. But the final decisions on which EOIs to be taken forward will be taken by a UK-wide panel. And that's because we're really interested in creating a really interesting portfolio of projects that represent geographies and represent the different types and scales of projects that we might see coming forward.
Great, thank you. And we've only got a couple of left, but this is probably an important one. If a place has previously had Parks for People funding, does that mean there'll be less of a priority for this scheme?
Absolutely not. I think that's an area that's of interest to us, in that, if they've had funding for major investments in their parks, we're obviously interested in ensuring that that's safe and secure, that investment for the future. So yeah, I would say please apply. It doesn't give an extra, if you like, it doesn't give you an extra joker in the pack, but it would be, it's an important thing to mention in an application. Yes.
Great, thank you. And then this is the converse to the question we've already had. Could an organisation or a partnership put in more than one application for different ideas, obviously, not for the same idea?
I might defer to Liz on this, but my view would be don't compete with yourself. But Liz.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing, Drew. I would probably, as a partnership, it would be better to decide what your priority for this programme would be. And as we said earlier, there's still opportunity to apply through our National Lottery Heritage Grants as normal. So if you have a few ideas, I would say target the one that you want to apply for this programme, and then perhaps come to us separately and talk to your local teams about other ideas you might have.
Great. Thank you. And then just one final question. As this is quite a short time frame for EOIs, are we looking for existing partnerships and project ideas? I guess this is a question about what level of detail and pre-work needs to go in to an expression of interest. Is that for you, Liz, maybe?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Are we really looking at existing projects and partnerships, given that the window is relatively short? The questioner has asked.
It's really about your ability to draw together a partnership in that timescale. We appreciate it's quite a tight timescale, but we're not looking for anything specifically. So if you are able to have those conversations in that timescale, obviously there is then time, if you are invited, to put in an application to develop that further before your application is due. So we're open to looking at more established or new partnerships in terms of the EOI stage.
Great, thank you.
The only other thing I would add is that we're really keen to support projects and make sure our investment goes to those places that are really able and up for delivery. So, if your idea is too maybe too, I was going to say too ambitious, that's not quite the right word, but if you really haven't sounded your idea out widely, and it might later fail because you haven't had the chance to have those conversations, then maybe that's not a good approach. But we really want you to be kind of hopefully inspired by what Kat and Ollie have said, and inspired by the opportunity that we have here to do something exciting and different. This is a chance to maybe rise above, where you've had to, or you've been forced to work, and actually think, what is our ambition for this place? What could we really do if we were given the resource and the capacity to achieve that?
Great, thank you all. I'm going to hand back to Matilda now, who will close this session for us.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to everyone. It's been so lovely to see everyone connecting in the chat, and that's absolutely the sort of thing we hope to see more of from this programme. So I'll just spend a few seconds closing the call by reminding you what you can do now and the ways you can get involved. We've heard lots about the expression of interest process, which you need to do before the 12th of November. But you can also book a space at one of our upcoming 6 webinars, which will run between now and December. And each of those will also include a Q&A opportunity. So do join those if you'd like to ask anything directly again. And then thirdly, please do sign up to our mailing list. It is open now, and you can sign up via our website. And that's the best place to ensure you get the information as early as possible. So we've come to the end of the webinar. So all that's left for me to do is to thank you all very, very much for joining and for all of your questions and comments, and to thank our panel members and speakers once more for their time and their insight. So please join us at our next webinar on the 21st of October, which is on urban green infrastructure. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day.